Can you all hear me okay? How about the people in the back? How about you, Richard? Yeah? Woo, okay. Well, I'm excited to be here. I'll tell you a big part of what I do in leading this camp and putting the many hours that Kathy and I and others have, really sacrificed and invested into doing this camp is for moments like tonight. See, tonight, I believe, is what we do this activity for. It's what it's really all about. So when we take a step back and ask ourselves, what is my life all about? What do I stand for? There's a popular song I've heard on the radio that asks that very question. I don't know what I stand for. And that is so true with so many of today's youth. So many of today's youth simply do not know what they stand for. And I hope that tonight, if you don't know what you stand for, that by the end of this talk, you'll have at least some idea. I was on my way up to the Clash tournament in San Jose, California. How many of you went up to that one? Anybody out there do that one? Yeah, a bunch of you. Okay. So on the way up the 5 freeway, there's about a 50, 60-mile section where there isn't really anything around. I mean, it's like cow pastures and that's it. And anyways, as I'm driving on by myself on my way up to San Jose, my gas light came on. And now I know what the gas light represents. I know that means, better not push it or your car is going to run out of gas. But in this instant, I thought I had mathematically, equated the amount of miles I could get out of my car before my car would run out of gas. Well, it turns out that I guess I'm not too good at math because I ran out of gas. And I remember, there's probably nothing worse than the feeling of your car starting to do that brrr, brrr. It almost made me feel like I was a gangster or something, with one of those cars low riding. I don't know how they do it. It's like those hydraulics. Well, my car was doing it, organically. It just naturally running out of gas, and I had the whole hip hop thing going down. And anyway, so yeah, my car ran out of gas out in the middle of nowhere. I got it off to the side of the road, and I'm like, great, what am I going to do now? Well, I GPS, I looked on my phone where the next nearest gas station would be at, and I noticed it was only about 3 miles up and over the hill that's where the nearest gas station was, and I was like, well, I have a bicycle in the back of my car, 3 miles, I could probably do that in, 20, 30 minutes, I'll just go and bike there. So that's what I did. I got my bicycle out, and there just happened to be a nice dirt road that kind of paralleled the 5 freeway. So I'm like, great, I don't even have to ride up on the freeway. I'll take this dirt road. And so that's what I did. I started riding my way out to the gas station. And I mean, again, there's nothing around. There was one other home in the whole area. And as I was riding by that home, they had a guard dog that was a pit bull. And they didn't have it on a leash. And he decided to come chasing after me. And it was funny because up until that point, I was just, having a nice little ride. I'm having a good time. I'm like, oh, this is nice. Smell the flowers. And then all of a sudden, here comes this raging dog saying, I want to tear your leg off. And I'm like, no, thank you. I like my leg. So it's amazing because, I was just cruising up to that point. But then when the dog started coming, I was like, okay, time to step on the gas. And so thankfully, I've raced bikes most of my life, so I have some, skills in that department. And after a mile or so or less, the dog was like, whoa, this guy's way too much trouble. I'll find something else to kill. So he let me go, and I was able to continue on my journey. I made a note to myself. Okay, I said, okay, not going back that way, finding alternative routes. So anyways, I kept going though, and I got to the gas station. And I go in there and I was like, hey, do you have a gas can that I could borrow? Do you have one that I need, I got my car, it's out of gas, I need a gas can. And she's like, oh, well, we do, but the person who's in charge of that gas can is gone for the day. I mean, apparently their gas can is so special that they had you had to get permission to use it. I don't know. So I was like, okay, so what I did next isn't technically legal, but I did it. I felt it was kind of an emergency, so don't do what I'm about to tell you, but I did it. So what I did is I bought a gallon of water. It's not a gasoline-proof device, but I got one of those Crystal Hill geyser bottles that has the handle. I was like, sweet, this will work out well. So I dumped out the water. I drank some of it. I didn't waste it all, but I put it on plants and stuff. And then I filled it up with filled it up with gasoline, and I put it on my handlebar, and I was like, sweet, I'll just ride back, and I'll get my... So I started riding back, I get on my bike, I'm all riding back, and all of a sudden, I just remember looking at it, and all of a sudden the handle snapped, and it's all... And then it fell onto the asphalt, boom, and it punctured it, and it started leaking out all over the place. And so I picked it up, and I'm like, great, how am I going to carry it? And now by the time I get there, it's all going to leak out. So I'm like, okay, plan B, let's go back and get another gallon. So I go back to the gas station, buy another gallon of water, and I bought a funnel too, and I triple bagged it this time. I'm like, okay, I'll put it triple bag. And so I get the gasoline, dump the water out, start my way back to the car. I took an alternative route to avoid Mr. Dog, and on the way back, this alternative route, for some reason, they had laid all these pipes across the road, and so I couldn't ride there, so I had to get off my bike, and I'm trying to balance this gallon of gasoline and carry my bike, and I'm like trying to get over these pipes. It's pretty embarrassing. But I made it. I got over there, and I eventually got back to my car. I'm like, sweet, okay, let's put the gas in. So I pull out my funnel, and I go to pour the gas, and my funnel is about 1 inch too short for being able to push open the valve so you can pour the gas in. If you pump gas, you have to push that valve thing open. It's closed and you got to push it. So I'm like, oh, what would I do? And I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And then I thought to myself, what would MacGyver do? and I thought of it. I tried to put a pin in there to try to cram it open, and that didn't work. But a number 2 pencil was just skinny enough to wedge it open to where I could have it about half open, and then I could just kind of angle the funnel and get about half of the gasoline in there. The other half would drip down my arm and down my pants and everything, so that's what I did. I just chugged it. I'm like, come on, baby, a half a gallon, that'll get me to that gas station. So I poured this thing in there. My clothes are getting drenched with gasoline, and eventually I get about half of it in there, and by the end I'm dripping with gas, smelling really bad, and I thought to myself, guess I should have paid better attention to that light, right? That warning light that was telling me I was running out of gas. Well, in the same way, if I could draw an analogy from that story, I think that there is warnings today about how we are using our time and the things that we are pursuing. I recently read a survey that we are becoming the most biblically illiterate generation ever. In fact, listen to this national survey of Christian teenagers here in America from 2008. It said this: fewer than half of them can name even the 4 Gospels. 60% of them could not name 5 of the 10 Commandments. 12% thought that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife. She's not, let me tell you. But my favorite one had to be this one. A whopping 50% thought that Sodom and Gomorrah were married. Now let me tell you, that's one marriage that burned to the ground. Hey, that's what I say. All right. Thank you. Yeah, okay. The point of those surveys, though, show us that the thing we're not spending our time and our life on is God's Word. So we're obviously spending it on something else. And tonight, that's what I want to focus this sermon, this message, this time on, is on those other things. And my challenge to you tonight is the heading of this talk, which is to don't waste your life. Don't waste your life. I hope if you remember nothing else about what I'm about to tell you, you will remember this: that your life matters, that it's a sum of the time that you have. Don't waste it. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. It says in Psalms 90, verse 12, it says this: so teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Now, I know a lot of young people who think, hey, I'm going to live forever. I'm going to live, I have a long time to go. I'm only, 13, 14. I'm going to live, 100 years. So I have a long time to figure out, Christianity or God or serving Him. But the reality is, none of us know how many days we have left. In fact, I was talking with a parent here today who shared with me that, her son at 10 years old died in an auto accident, tragically. Didn't anticipate it. Didn't know it was going to happen. And so it is. That tragedy, when it happens, the thing that makes it so shocking and so bad is we didn't anticipate it. We didn't plan it. We don't know how much time any of us have left. So tonight, I think it's really important that we take a step back and we examine how we are using our time and the resources and things God's given us. You know, Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So few of us even take time to reflect on how we use our time. So let's look at point number 1, that now is the time to stop wasting time. Now is the time to stop wasting time. How are you using your free time? Let's look at what Ephesians 5:15 through 16 says. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time because the days are evil. Underline that, best use of time. You know, we are a culture that is obsessed with pursuing pleasure and entertainment. We are a lot like the ancient Epicureans. How many of you know who the Greek Epicureans were? The Greek Epicureans was a group of people whose sole purpose for living was to pursue pleasure. Whatever was pleasure was all that they pursued. They believed that this life was all there was to life, and so they thought they should just live it to its fullest, party all the time, and get as much pleasure out of it as possible. And in a lot of ways, we can see that our culture is continuing to move us in that direction. You know, Mark Hamby pointed out that right now, a lot of us are obsessed with this idea of amusement, amusing ourselves. But do any of you know what the difference between amusement and the word muse means? Anybody know? The word amusement has been associated with the idea of the absence of thought, of pure one-way enjoyment, that you're just sitting there like a couch potato soaking something in. But the word thought means this: it's to consider something carefully. But we are a society, and especially in our pop culture, that is obsessed with things that amuse us. From television shows, to movies, to video games, to our Facebook accounts, to Instagramming. All of these activities are driven to provide us with some form of amusement. Listen to this. According to a study done by the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2010 of ages 8 to 18-year-olds, they found that today's teens spend more than 7.5 hours a day watching TV, listening to music, surfing the web, social networking, and playing video games. This means we have seen an increase of over an hour and 20 minutes alone just in cell phone use since 1999. We are among the most amused generation that the world has ever seen, and we are now wasting more time than the world has ever seen. If you continue at an average rate of 7.5 hours, that comes out to over 50 hours a week, which if you live an average lifespan, 10 years of your life will have been spent wasted on things that don't matter. I mean, that's a tragic reality, that if you live to an old age, if you live into your 60s, 70s, or 80s, about 10 years of your life will have been wasted merely on amusement. Here are the top 5 things, according to this evidence that was published in the Washington Post, that teenagers are spending their time on. Number 1, watching TV. 2, listening to music. 3, surfing the web. 4, social networking. 5, video games. 2 of them I really want to kind of dive into a bit more. We're going to look at television and video games. 2 that hit home close to me. All right, watching TV. Do you know that the form of how we're watching TV is changing? A lot of people say, oh, I don't watch that TV very much, but they do watch Hulu, Netflix, and YouTube. And that's still TV. That's still watching a one-way communication. According to a study recently done, that 98% of American homes have the television on for 7.5 hours each day. During the average lifespan of an American, they will see 1.5 million acts of violence and 360,000 murders and wasted years of their life. What are the things they're watching? Well, according to the Black Eyed Peas, cultural philosophers that they are, they said this: wrong information always shown by the media, negative images is the main criteria, infecting the young minds faster than bacteria, kids want to act like what they see on the cinema. Yo, Whatever happened to the values of humanity? Whatever happened to fairness and equality? Instead of spreading love, we're spreading animosity. Lack of understanding leading us away from unity. That's the reason why sometimes I'm feeling under. That's the reason why sometimes I'm feeling down. There's no wonder why I'm feeling under. Got to keep my faith alive till love is found. Now ask yourself, where is the love? The quote that really hits me in that song is the one about infecting young minds faster than bacteria. You know, sociologists and even psychologists, you have done studies about how the things that we watch influence our thought processes. You know, it's that classic saying of garbage in, garbage out. That the things you choose to eat for your visual entertainment, metaphorically, is the types of things that will come out of you. That if you only eat dessert items, amusement, then you probably won't have an appetite for real things of meat and value. So chances are that if you're bored with the Bible, it's because you filled up on entertaining pleasures and you have no room for it. That's a tragic reality that is all too true for many people. And it's why in Romans 1:28 it says this, "Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done." Do you know that this verse means that you can literally fill your mind with so much garbage for so long that your mind really becomes depraved, that your whole outlook on reality gets distorted, and that you no longer see things as they actually are, but through a perverted lens, if you will. And that's what can happen if you continue down a path of just continuing seeking amusement and pleasure. It's a warped and twisted reality, which is why I like the way another hip-hop artist pointed out. Going to hip-hop right here, but this guy's a Christian. His name's Lecrae. Any Lecrae fans out there? All right, good. How many of you have heard his song, Jesus Music? I love these lines that he says. I'll try to do it justice. He says this, one thing that's fasho, everywhere I go, people caught up in themselves, money, cars, and clothes. Yep, they talk about it all the time and put it in their songs. They drive around and play it like it ain't nothing wrong. And all they talk about is sinful stuff. Got everybody acting bad, thinking that they a thug. Well, and they trying to drown me out, but they ain't gonna count me out. No doubt, what Lecrae is essentially saying, let me interpret that for you. He's saying, don't focus on things that the popular culture, television, music are telling you, that the message mainstream culture gives you is really promoting sinful stuff. So, what is the other thing besides television that young people are wasting a lot of time on? Well, this is one that hits home close for me. It's called video games. An interesting study was done on the effect of television and video games on how it impacts your brain on a neurological level. And it turns out that TV and video games are what they call primarily right brain activity. You know that you have two sides to your brain. You have the right side and the left side of the brain. The right side is primarily the emotional side. It's the side that drives pleasure. It's the side that gives us like our good feelings when we're watching something that excites us or is enjoyable. Our left side of our brain is our more critical thinking side. That's what you're doing right now is left side as you write notes or if you're listening to me. If you're texting on your phone or using your iPad, you're doing right brain activity right now. But if you're doing left brain activity, those are things like reading and thinking critically and certainly debating. It's more focused on using the left side of your brain. The thing is, you need both sides of your brain to correctly process information. That if you're only getting right side, then you're only experiencing an emotional high and you're not actually articulating or analyzing the things that is being processed to you, which in essence means you're like a sponge. You're just soaking things up, but you're not actually communicating them back out. In other words, you're not debating with your television, you're just listening to what it says. One of the societal impacts that we see resulting from kids who are becoming addicted in video games is this. There's a recent phenomenon known as the boy man. In fact, a sociologist by the name of Gary Cross wrote for Columbia University Press about this new phenomenon known as boy man, where men who are in their 30s and 40s year old age aren't growing up. And he cites statistics. Do you know what the average age of men or males watching Saturday morning cartoons is now? What the average age is? 23. 23. That means that we have people who are full-grown adults, living on their own potentially, who are still watching Saturday morning cartoons. To me, that's really sad. But I saw this firsthand when I was attending Point Loma Nazarene University. I remember on Friday nights, getting together with a group of my friends and going downtown to Balboa Park to take Victorian dance lessons. It's really classical. It's really cool. I enjoy it. I recommend it. But when we would leave like at 5 o'clock or so on a Friday night, I remember passing this dorm, this unit where there were about 4 to 6 guys who would be playing World of Warcraft. And they had like their little headpieces on and talking to each other. And they would be playing that literally all night long. And I would leave and then we would come back. And that's what they would do week after week after week, as the best part of college was passing them by. The developing of relationships, the developing of friendships, the memory I have of those guys is them playing World of Warcraft. And I think that's really sad because they missed out on the best part of college. I know that there are some of you here who are listening to me right now, and you say, you know what, Griff, you don't know what it's like. You don't know. You're a debater. You're an athlete. You're a cyclist. And let me just tell you something real quick about myself that you may not know. I was sitting right where you were years ago when I was 15 years old. And even before that, when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I really had a video game addiction. I don't know what that looks like for you, but what that looked like for me, I looked for opportunities. All of my free time just went to playing video games. It got so bad that I began to get overweight. In fact, my brothers gave me the nickname Nintendo Belly. That was my name. Yeah, you can laugh at that. Yeah, I think it's funny. And that's the direction I was headed. I wasn't particularly good at sports. I certainly wasn't in physical good shape, good physical health, and I wasn't particularly good at school. So video games to me was my escape. And I can understand those of you who are saying, hey, that's my escape too. And for me, it gives me pleasure. I enjoy doing it. It's how I find an escape. But let me tell you, you'll never meet a boss who asks you, what level of Call of Duty did you get to? There's not a girlfriend on the planet who's going to ask you if you saved the princess in Super Mario Brothers. So let me tell you that it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. You can be the best video gamer on the planet. Nobody cares. You still may say, but Griff, you don't get it. I have this under control. I can handle this. I can have my addiction. This is what matters to me. My video games matter. Well, let me just tell you what your future is going to look like 20 years, 10 years from now. You're the type of person then who's going to be living in their mother's basement on a lifetime supply of Mountain Dew and pizza. You can't have a real job. You can't have a girlfriend. You can't have a relationship because you're so wrapped up in this pursuit of pleasure that your life is becoming a waste. And that's all there is. I don't think there's anything more embarrassing or pathetic than the boy man. The person who refuses to take responsibility for their life, and instead they simply want to play another game, to have more pleasure. And let me tell you, if that is your pursuit in life, it is going to be empty, it is going to be shallow, and when it's your time to die, nobody's really going to care because you've only lived for yourself. So let me tell you something. If that's the direction you want to go, you should know that there is a better choice for you. You don't have to continue down this addiction path of playing video games. Look, I'm not taking a legalistic approach here. I'm not saying, they're all of the devil and, you should, worship Satan as you play or something. That's not my point. My point is that very few of us do it in moderation. Very few have real good self-control in this area. And instead, they pursue their television, their video games, their Facebooking, Instagramming. They pursue all of these things for their own personal pleasure. They send those requests for the Candy Crush saga so they can get to level 106 and they want your life. Like, please stop sending those requests, okay? Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. What they do care about, though, is who you are as a person and the relationships that you're developing. See, if your pursuit is only about pleasure, then you're pursuing one of the most meaningless, empty, shallow lives you possibly can. I love the way that C.S. Lewis's wife, Joy Davidman, stated this. She said, listen, living for your own pleasure is the least pleasurable thing a person can do. If his neighbors don't kill him in disgust, he will die slowly of boredom and powerlessness. That is your future if you continue to just pursue your own amusement, your own absence of thought, your own selfish desire, and your own pursuit of pleasure. It's never going to provide you contentment. How many of you have gotten like a new bicycle or a new video game only to see that game get outdated within a year or two? I mean, it happens every time. It's like we think that the next thing will somehow bring us happiness, but then when we get that next thing, it's still empty. It still doesn't really provide contentment or satisfaction. Nor will video games, nor will television or any pursuit of entertainment. It can't possibly fill that God-sized hole inside your heart. And as long as you pursue pleasure, it will always be empty. It will always be meaningless. Now is the time to grow up. As 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away the ways of childhood behind me, or I put away childish things. Young men, listen to me tonight. I want to see you become real men. That's going to mean making choices, different choices with the way you use your time. If you're all about video games, entertainment, and amusing yourself right now, it is time to change. I would challenge you tonight to reconsider the way you're using times and reconsider, like I did, that it was time for me to give up video games, to get off the couch and to get outside and start meeting people, start riding my bicycle, start learning things that were important and would have value in my life. See, some of you may say, hey, Coach Griff, why aren't you married yet? Why haven't you, bought a house yet or done some of the other things that your peers have at your age? I would tell you is because I lost way too many years wasting time pursuing things that didn't matter. See, the worst form of failure is not trying something and failing, but rather it's succeeding at things that don't matter. Nobody cares what level of game, what level of entertainment you're going to get to. That's not what really counts in the end. So please hear me, because I'm telling you from experience, that's not the life you want to go down. God can restore the years the locusts have eaten, but don't let them eat it in the first place. Now is the time to make different choices. Now is also the time, in point 2, to throw out your idols. Now is the time to throw out your idols. How do you define the word idol? It's easy for us to look at idols as, this ridiculous statue, and we think, how stupid could people be back then to worship an image made by man, just this wooden thing that doesn't talk or move, and people would worship it and give sacrifices to it. But if you consider the definition of idols as things that are made by human hands, or anything that is your priority or receives your glory or takes the place of God, under that definition, then anything that is a priority in your life is your idol. And is it really that different? I mean, when we spend 7.5 hours in front of the computer screen or the television, is our idol really all that different from the old statues that the ancients and the Epicureans used to worship? No, it's not. There's still meaningless things that are just not ever going to really fulfill that God-sized hole in our heart. So what are the idols that we see people pursuing today? I think there are at least 2 of them. I think the 2 most common forms of idols, number 1, For most men, it's to make money and to be successful is their idol. A lot of young men, go off and to get to their college careers and jobs in the pursuit of money. But here's what Matthew 6:24 says about that. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. But for most men today, money and success is what it's all about. I recently came across this video as I was hanging out in the dorms, and it goes something like this. That as men are pursuing success and money, I thought this song was right on point. It goes something like this. Let's sing with Krispy Kreme. I am the baddest of them all. I am the baddest of them all. If you ain't about money, then I don't mess with y'all. Y'all think I don't get girls because I ain't very tall? If she see my stacks, I bet you that she calls. Wow. Let's leave it at that point. That song is kind of a humorous point, but it does make a starking reality that most people measure their success or self-worth. Many men do this based on how much money they have. That the more money you have, somehow that equates to your value as a human being. But do you know that God's currency, God's standard is entirely different? He doesn't see your self-worth based on what you have, but based on whose you are and and the way you live your life for others. Those are the types of things that God cares about. It's radically different. As a young man, I grew up as the son of a poor missionary. You guys saw my dad last night, and I'll tell you, as a junior high boy, I was definitely in that video game, selfish, all about me. And I looked around at the nice clothes, the nice things that some of my friends have, and I was easily jealous and wanted their life. One of those friends was my good buddy named Lloyd, who I became best friends with in my junior high years. Lloyd had everything I didn't. He lived in a 3-story mansion on the golf course. He had a huge screen TV with a projector that we could play almost life-size video games on. He had his own indoor swimming pool, dance floor. Everything was better at Lloyd's house. He had better food, better entertainment, better clothes. Everything that I thought I wanted, I saw in Lloyd's life. And as a young junior high man, I remember going to his house was like going to Disneyland. And I thought, oh man, if I could just have his life, I would be a complete person. I would have meaning. I would be content. I would love my life. And that was my reality. Until one night, that reality was rocked to the core. I remember sitting with Lloyd on the stairs case at his house one night. His parents had been fighting again and been arguing, I don't know about what. But I remembered Lloyd turning to me and saying words that I've never forgotten. He turned to me and he said, "Griff, I wish it was the way it used to be, before my parents had any money." And now those words were shocking to me. Because for me as a junior high boy, I saw his life and I said, that's what I want. That's where meaning, that's everything. You have everything, Lloyd. How could you say that? And he told me about how his parents inherited money, how they became successful and were millionaires, but that money had torn his family apart. And it wasn't until years later that I realized the truth of what he was telling me, because money did tear his family apart. His siblings got into all sorts of trouble. His parents did get a divorce. And I'll tell you, I've never seen a family so implode as what I saw of his family. And the reality that struck me years later is that I was really the wealthy one, because I had parents who loved me, who sacrificed for me, and who told me that there was a God in heaven who had a better plan for my life, that if I wouldn't be so selfish and so self-centered, I could live a life that mattered. I could live a life that was about giving back to other people. But so few of us are willing to step back and say, what about somebody else? What about them? Do they know Jesus? Do they know what really matters in life? Or are we so caught up in ourselves we can't look anywhere outside of the mirror? Let me challenge you tonight. If that is your pursuit, if that is your idol, it is time to throw it out. Because God has a better plan for you, as he did for me. You know, Ecclesiastes 5:10 says this, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. You know, that was written by King Solomon, who is known in history as one of the most wealthy men who ever lived. You know, he had it all. He had women, wealth, gold. He was the cream of the crop, the wealthiest man alive. And you know what he said about it all? He said it's all vanity, meaningless, chasing of the wind. See, young people, let me tell you about something. If your pursuit is simply to get to the top, you may get there, but when you do, you'll find out it's meaningless, it's empty, it's vanity and chasing the wind. Because if it's all about you, then that's all it's ever going to be about, which means it's awful lonely when you get to the top. You know, I've had the opportunity to win a lot of awards in cycling and in speech and debate events, but none of those awards talk to me. Like, none of those are like my friends. I can't like keep it, you know, they don't keep me warm at night or communicate with me, you know. They don't do me any good. No, the only things that really matter are the relationships that we build and the people that we invest in for the kingdom of God. You know, those are the only two things you really take from this earth. So if you're all about money, you're never going to have enough, and you can't take it with you. You know, the second idol that I see is a whole different one, and it's more of one that I see girls struggling with than guys. You know, can I have all the girls yell out, "Hey you"? Hey you. Again, "Hey you." Now all the guys, now all the dudes. Again. Obviously, there's a different sound in tone. You know, I don't know what it's like to be a girl. I mean, I'm not one. I love being a man. I'm happy being a man. I like doing men's stuff. I'm into, you know, mountain bike racing, and I'm a man. I'm cool with that. That's who God made me to be. But I know that women, and I've done some research on this, you know, they struggle with different things than what men do. And as I was doing research for this, and I sent out prompts to kind of find out what are things that girls struggle with, and one of the most common areas, an idol that often comes up for girls, is beauty. And let me just tell you, young ladies, I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like for the pressures that the culture may put upon you. I don't know. But I tell you what, if you make beauty your idol, you're never going to get there either. See, there's a Bible verse I want to share with you. It's in Proverbs 31:30. It says this, "Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." You know, that's a radically different perspective than what the media tells you, right? It tells you that you have to look good, you have to be beautiful, that your self-worth as a girl, the lie is that it's only in how good you look. And I can identify with that a little bit. I remember, again, in my junior high, I don't know why all these bad things happened to me in junior high, but it's true. I used to get made fun of for being so white. You know, I'm a pretty white boy, if you know that. And so, you know, I decided to try to do something about that. I got this bronze sunless tanner. Now, let me just tell you, it turned my skin orange. And if you think junior high boys are rough on you for being too white, wait till you walk to school orange. I mean, they mocked me endlessly. They said, you know, they thought I had changed races or something. They're like, what is this guy, like an orangist or an Oriental or something? And I mean, they were just harassing me to no end. So I get that. But you know what? I found out that years later, in other cultures, it's the exact opposite. When I went to China, I found out that being white was actually really cool. It's really funny because over there, like, all the girls carry umbrellas, and they are all about promoting whiteness. I'm just telling you, that's the way it is. I was even offered a modeling contract in China because I was so white. Like, true story. So my point of that story is this, though. that beauty really is culturally, it's a cultural bias. There's just this cultural perspective of arbitrary, it's totally arbitrary, of what we call beauty. You know, it changes with time. It changes with culture. In the past, you know, plump, round women were considered the more beautiful ones. And then today, it's like this continual push to be skinnier and skinnier. And it's so arbitrary. God has made us come in different bone structures, different shapes and sizes. And for many of you who are trying to measure up to a artificial standard, let me just tell you, you can never get there because many of those images have been so doctored and so photoshopped and altered that they're not even a real person. In fact, I have a couple videos that I want to share with you guys tonight. Do we have the Dove's Evolution of video ready to go? Do we? Let's play that. Play that. No wonder our perception of beauty is distorted, is what it says. Is this working? All right, Milan? Okay. You know, if your pursuit in life is to pursue beauty, one of the reasons you're never going to get there, at least to the level that you may think, is because it's not even a real level to get to. The artificial concept of beauty that our culture has created is continuing to push people into an unrealistic world. A world that is not the way God designed it to be. You know, I recently heard about something of these preteen girls doing these videos questioning whether or not they're ugly. Have any of you heard about this? These preteen girls have been posting videos asking the YouTube audience whether or not they're pretty or are they ugly. Do we have that video ready to go? Let's show that one.
Yet another disturbing trend has emerged in cyberspace. Young girls, sometimes preteen, are posting videos on YouTube asking this poignant question: am I pretty or am I ugly? One video alone had more than 4 million hits, generating, of course, some very... Listen, social networks are nasty places, and these videos are creating some terrible, nasty comments that these young girls have to absorb. Watch this.
I just want to make a random video seeing if I was ugly or not, because a lot of people call me ugly, and I think I am ugly.
I just want to know if I am ugly or am I pretty. If you can see I'm wearing makeup.
People say I'm ugly. So tell me, am I?
And with that, these young vulnerable girls face the wrath of the YouTube commenters.
You know, what kind of messed up world do we live in when preteen girls go to find validation on a YouTube video? Let me just tell you, if that is where our world is taking us, we are in for some dark days, because the only thing worse than I think these girls posting these videos was some of the comments that were made in response to that. Comments saying that they were uglier than a demon, or comments that would encourage them to commit suicide. And unfortunately, when we live in a world that is lived online, people don't see the real world implications and conclusions that those bad words and mean things ultimately result in. And let me just say to you, if you're a young lady who is struggling with anorexia or bulimia, we have counselors who are willing to talk to you about that. The worst thing you could possibly do is to struggle with that alone. I remember the reality of this situation hitting me in college when I was told that the pipes in the girls' dorms, all of them had to be replaced because there had been so much vomiting that it had eaten through the piping. And they had to rip it out and restore all of the piping. See, I did some studies on anorexia and bulimia, and believe it or not, 86% of young girls by the age 20 report having an onset of an eating disorder. The mortality rate is 12 times higher for girls who struggle with anorexia. In the ages of 15 to 24, they are 12 times more likely to die. So let me just tell you something. If that is something you're struggling with, please get help. We should never allow beauty to become a god, to become an idol, especially when it's so arbitrary. Do you know that there is a God in heaven who loves you just the way you are? You were made in His image, and you are an image bearer of the Most High God. You are a daughter of the Most High King. Your intrinsic value as a human being should not be based on your appearance, but rather based on the content of your character and who you are in Christ. Don't let this world lie to you. Don't accept the idols that the world tries to sell you. Instead, declare that you are a child of God, made in His image. So now is the time. Now is the time for point 3, to get funeral ready. How do we get funeral ready? Well, we first start with realizing that we're going to die. I hate to break this to you young people, but your time on planet Earth will come to an end. You know, I've been to graveyards, and the one thing that we see is similar in all graveyards is tombstones. You know the one similarity that all tombstones have? They have a born on date and an end date. But the thing that distinguishes tombstones from a well-lived life to a poorly lived life is the dash in the middle. See, it's that dash in the middle that defines a person's life. It defines the type of life that they lived, whether or not they were really ready to die. In Ecclesiastes 7:2, it says this: "It's better to spend your time at funerals than at festivals, for you are going to die and you should think about it while there's still time." So, see, we have to re-examine what our priorities are and where we're spending our life, because nobody knows how much time that we have left. You know, back in 1999, a young girl who was only 14 or 15 years old by the name of Cassie was a Christian at Columbine High School when 2 gunmen came into her classroom, asked her if she believed in God. She said yes. They pulled the trigger. That was the end of her life. She didn't think she was going to die that day. She didn't know it was going to happen. But was she ready to go? Well, she wrote later that, you know, the impact that she had had for the kingdom of God was something that she wouldn't forget. That her impact for Christianity remains to this day. That people like your coach or my coach is continuing to tell her story. And her story is one that matters because she died as a person declaring her faith in Christ. I wonder how many of us would be willing to die for our beliefs. I think even a bigger question would be, are we willing to live for them? See, while many people will say, yeah, I think I would be willing to die for my faith, I think a lot more of us should be willing to answer the question, no, will we live for Christ? Because whatever time we have left, that's going to define the life we live. And some days, people are going to come to your funeral. What are they going to say about the life you lived? So if you look at your homework assignment that I've given you on the back of this sheet, you can see in question 3 that I've challenged you to write your eulogy. I challenge you to write it in 2 sections. The first section about what you think people will say at your funeral, and in the second section, what you would want them to say. See, in today's talk, I've talked to you about a number of things, from pursuing your time wisely, to examining the way you use time, to getting rid of the idols in your life. But let me close by challenging you with this, that ultimately none of it matters if you're not ready for your funeral. And the reality that our life is going to come to an end is a reality that we have to begin accepting now so that we live with a purpose for whatever time we have left, that we would redeem the time, for the days are evil. You know, I don't know if any of you are ever going to run out of gas. But if you ever see that gas light come on, I hope it will remind you that your time on planet Earth is running out too. As the Supertones once said, is time running out? We can't say. I do know we have one day less than we did yesterday. Will you pray with me? Dear Lord God, I just thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity, God, to just talk about things that really matter. Lord, may we live a life that really matters. God, may we not waste our life. May we not live a life in such a way that it's so self-absorbed that we're only living for pleasure. God, may we cast out the idols in our life. Lord, may we be prepared for our funeral. God, may we live in such a way that people will say at our funeral, that was a well-lived life. He was a person or she was a person who cared about others and gave their life for someone else. So God, I just pray that we can be like the missionaries to the Aka Indians who said that only one life which soon will pass and only what's done for Christ will last. I pray, God, that we would live such a life now. I pray that you would bless this camp in the rest of the time we have together. May we grow in relationships and in the things that really matter. I pray this now in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, guys.